Alright, so this is part 5, the last one in the series. Basically what I'm going to walk you through here is how to kind of lay out important stuff with the laser cutter. I think that, as I mentioned a couple times in the past few videos, I think like things like framing, the wall and ceiling and window framing, even the strapping. I think those are all kind of things you probably want to just do by basically, what are those? Those are all things you basically just want to do by cutting sticks of a certain dimension and assembling them into frames, keeping them as square as possible. But in general, you're going to save, tons of time by not trying to cut all these pieces out, keep track of which one is which length, and so on and so forth. So I highly recommend, you just cut those, buy certain size sticks and cut them manually. So what I'm going to cover then is how to lay out everything else. Now I already covered how to lay out like the contours that form that cardboard base. And I just want to reiterate that for anyone that might have missed it from the first tutorial. So I'm going to turn off everything, that I'm not going to lay out as part of my framing. And then strapping, where's that? Okay. Basically, most of what I'll do here will be just kind of continuing in the same methods. So I'll show you a couple of different examples, but I'm not going to do every single part because that would just be massively repetitive. All right, so let me just reiterate how to do these ground contours. So I'm going to grab those. I'm going to use the command shear. So let me make a copy first. And again, I'm going to use the command shear. So looking at it in top view now, I'm going to draw a line from one corner straight up. And then I'm going to start to... Oh, I'm sorry, I did do this wrong. So let's see if we kept our surfaces or our outlines. I guess we didn't. So let me just do a quick thing here. So this is why you want to save the lines that you make the extruded surfaces from. Alright, but basically, if you had those things as like 2D outlines, or in this case just the surfaces, then you would grab everything, use the command shear, go to one corner, drag a line straight up and click, and then drag a line straight out. What we're looking for here, and I'm holding Alt on the keyboard to avoid snapping to anything. But at some point I will have sheared them far enough apart that they're not overlapping at all. And because because they're only 2D surfaces, I'm not distorting the geometry, right? Like the direction of the shear was perpendicular to those 2D outlines. And so now if I go into front view, I can pretty easily just say, okay, make 2D. Again, I'm in front view. Oops, I should have done that properly. So obviously, everything you make 2D will only show up if it's in frame. So zoom out far enough you can see everything, then do a make 2D. All right. it real quick. Okay, and then, under our layer make 2D, we're going to see those things. First of all, they're outlines, right? So there's 2D lines here. They're in top view, which means we can print them, and they're closed outlines, which is going to make our laser cut happen a lot faster and more efficiently. And then what I would do also, of course, is just to make a kind of maybe 32 by 18 window, and just kind of start to lay them out in sheets. And you can even actually label them if you want. So I would just use the command text. I would say this is, I'll just use numbers, because that'll be the least amount of cutting. And then I'll just label them somewhere down there where I don't have to, and I can even actually array this. So in the X direction, I would want 32, obviously. That's how many layers I have. All right. Oops, I didn't click. I messed up there. 32. Snap to the corner of one and then to the corner of the other. All right. And then you could go one at a time. Just double click on it to edit it. Shouldn't take too long. And then what you would want to do is come back. So I'm sure you guys are aware by now that like cutting on the laser cutter has to do with the colors that you use to define your lines. So I could set my outline to some color. And then I also would want to set my numbers here to a different color. So I'm going to make a new layer, call it score, set it to one of the colors that the laser uses. And then when I have these texts all defined, I'll just go in here and explode them. And then put them on that layer. That way I can set different settings for the numbers, and I can score those, just do them fast and kind of etch them into the surface without cutting them out. All right, so that's the best kind of trick I know for laying out that type of base, those contours. The other thing I would say, for the most part, I would just kind of go layer by layer. Now, some of these things are going to be harder to lay out. Probably, okay, let's talk about these ones with scored lines on them. So what I would do if I had that, for example, and hopefully you remembered to group it when you drew those lines, but I would go object by object. I would use the command isolate, and then I would set my view to a projection where I can see just that object and the lines that I want to draw on it. And again, I would just go make 2D. And again, I'm also going to make sure I hit maintain source layers. And that's the fastest, easiest way to take, something that, first of all, is a 3D object, right? And make it 2D. And second of all, has a lot going on, a lot of lines and stuff like that. You may find you still have to kind of clean a few things up, but shouldn't be too much of a big deal. Oops. And then you do want to be careful you don't have like duplicate lines or anything like that. And then, like before, I would put these on a separate layer. So I could go in here and just go select objects, join that. I want it to be red, so I'll keep it red. We don't have to put it on a separate layer, right? I misspoke. But we do want to give it the right color so that we're like cutting it in the most efficient way. So I would go one by one and lay them out like that. Hit show to bring everything back. I'll do like this surface as well. Let's go with cladding square lines, invert, oops. Whoa, did not mean to do that. Select objects, isolate. All right, let me hide the rest. So again, I would just go object by object and make 2D basically. Oops. I could go, and I should also point out, you really want to make sure that you're not looking at something backwards. So for example, this is the outside face of this geometry, and we can easily make it 2D from here, but then our score lines would be on the wrong side, right? So I want to make sure I'm looking at it from the right side. There we go, okay. And again, make 2D. And like I said, I would keep my layers all the same. In other words, don't put everything on like cut, score, like don't put everything on the same layer. Just change the colors so that I can be sure I have all the parts that I need and so on. All right. And then finally, let's talk about the cladding a little bit. So that's probably your most complex kind of layer that you need to lay out. Everything else I would pretty much just do the same. But this one, because there's so many different little surfaces, and it's going to be really hard to go one by one and do make 2D and all that stuff. It's going to be a real pain. So what I would do instead is basically make a copy. So I'm going to select these objects. I'm going to just duplicate the whole layer. Select sublayer, let's see, duplicate layer and objects. So I'm going to set that as my current. I'll just change the color a little bit so I can tell the difference. All right, and then I'm going to explode everything. So we modeled everything with a thickness, obviously, so we could kind of sort out how the corners would go. But then basically what I want to do is reduce everything to one surface or one outline. See how when I explode it, there's two faces of each of these geometries? Let's say delete it. So we missed one there. Missed one there. And there. Alright, great. Got a couple duplicates, but that's okay. So basically those are all the things I need to lay out, right? Now they should be, if I select them all in type direction, as long as I didn't delete the wrong face, I want to have basically the face that I want to cut from. And again, it doesn't matter too much with the cladding because there's no, I'm sorry, with the sheathing because there's no score lines on it. But oops, I missed one. There's somewhere there. And that's why it's good to copy too, so we can just like make sure. So I missed that one too. Okay. So as long as we kept like all the surfaces that form the outside face, and again, we can check that by using the command direction. Just type dir and it'll show you by arrow which side is facing up. And then we're going to use a command called Unroll Surface. And because these are all 2D surfaces now, what that's going to do for us is it's just going to lay them all out flat. Now, what's great about that is we can do a bunch of them. Pretty fast. So we don't have to sit here and go through each one. And let me just show you, so as I'm unrolling these, they're all kind of I guess I should actually be doing this with 2 windows. So for example, if I unroll this guy, it appears in my top view near the origin. Okay, so then I would just go one by one, and I would kind of lay them out in a way that I can keep track. And the reason that I was showing you like that direction trick, and it's only going to matter for like things that aren't just rectangles basically. But like, for example, if we look at this surface, so this surface is facing out. So if I unroll this, the way I'm going to see it is from this side, from the side that's facing out. However, that is not the side that we'd actually see in the model, right? We're actually looking at this side. Now, because of like the way the laser burns, and I mean, it'll especially matter for where we have scoring. But if we just go in here and go direction and flip that guy before we unroll it, it'll give us the right side facing out. So we just flip it. So that is, we're seeing the side that we're going to actually see facing out in the model, in the physical model, because we have the kind of orientation set right. Now for the rectangles, obviously it doesn't matter because you could flip them and they'll work, you know, the same. So we could use the front as the back and vice versa. And let's see. Oh yeah, so, and then the final thing to do here, once you had them all laid out, just like we did before when we were modeling the window frames, I would just say dupe border. Select all the objects, and then boom. And we could put that on a layer where we have them in red, so it'll cut. And then lay your stuff out on your sheets. That's basically going to be the best. Those methods are going to be the best for kind of laying out the parts, assembling them, or kind of organizing them on sheets, labeling them. Again, for most of the stuff, I would just lay it out in a way where you can keep track of the order of how things go. Yeah, and I think, you know, if you, I mean, for most of these, like framing elements, you'll be able to just come into your model and measure things. So, like if we were to try to do all our framing, I would just make a like I would just strip my model down to that, go in here and add a couple of dimensions, you know, like that's obviously 6 inches. That's whatever, 8.2, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so just go through and kind of dimension things, and then you can easily cut them. Lay them out. So that's going to wrap up the laser layout tutorial. And the next series of videos are going to cover kind of building on this, how to make a digital model of the whole project, and use that as a kind of environment to make our section perspective renderings from. All right, that's it.